Welcome back, everybody. Stoner Jesus Show live on the old video chat. We have Clint Russell from the Liberty Lockdown Podcast, libertylockdownpodcast.com. You see the pertinent information like magic scrolling there along the bottom. Clint, welcome to the show, and thanks for taking the time to be on, man.
Thank you very much for having me. I can't wait to talk.
Not a problem. As I said, I know we're trying to get more Liberty people on the show. I try to keep it a lighthearted show, but there are times when I will stray. Like I did a big segment, I guess last month it was on vaccines for kids, which to me is like in the different level of, you have the COVID tyranny and all that shit, but then experimenting on children. And there was a little video clip of the dude from the FDA basically saying, hey, we, to know what's in these vaccines, we just got to start giving them to people and see what happens. But in general, I try to stay away from heavy shit. But back in the day, I used to have a lot of Liberty people on. I had Dave Smith on in like 2016, I think it was.
Nice.
And I try to get away from it, but it's just we're in such a time now where, especially from my perspective, because a lot of my listeners are cannabis people and a lot of them are left leaning. And I was just talking about this with Chrissy Mayer yesterday. I interviewed her. A lot of them they've seen the persecution over the years of cannabis users, and to this day, the federal government won't admit that marijuana is a medicine. And in that area, they're like, oh, government, stay out of my, leave me alone. I'm not hurting anybody, all that stuff. But into pretty much every other aspect of life, they're begging for the government to come take care of things, take this over, make this decision for me, tell me what to wear on my face, all of that. So I figured that getting some people like you on may help do what little part I can with what, audience I've been able to amass to kind of break down that wall and show people that, it's the government's bad in one spot because they're bad in all spots. And that's why they say it's not just an anomaly that they suck on cannabis. It's their whole thing. So, like I said, thank you for being on. Your podcast, Liberty Lockdown. What made you get started with that and get into this whole political sphere?
I was a second-gen libertarian, so that's rare. My dad found Murray Rothbard and the Libertarian Party back in the 70s.
Awesome.
I was born in the 80s, and even though he didn't raise me, I was influenced by these long car rides we would have, where I would spend 1 week in a month with him, and he would just talk to me about the founding fathers and what liberty meant and why it was valuable and why it was so hard fought and why it was so rare. And those things just kind of got imbued in me. I was never really interested in being involved in politics. I was always kind of on the periphery. I was paying attention. I was certainly very passionate about my beliefs, but I'm kind of, I don't know. I guess I've always been a little bit black-pilled when it comes to the political system, and I just never thought I could really make a difference. And then I was an entrepreneur. I was a mortgage lender, and I just tried to focus on, bettering myself and my family's lives and well-being. And then 2020 rolls around, and they decide, no more. You're not allowed to put your head in the sand and ignore what we're doing any longer, and we're going to lock you and everyone down, basically. And then at that point, I was like, okay, well, this is a bridge too far. And because I was a private money lender, which means I actually care about my investors' capital, I decided immediately that under a lockdown paradigm, there was no way I could safely invest their capital because I didn't know how the government was going to respond. I didn't know how the economy was going to respond. I thought it was going to be really instantly catastrophic. It turns out that we've bought some time by printing trillions and trillions of dollars, and ultimately we've only grown this bubble bigger. So it's going to get much, much worse in the future, but it bought us some time. Long story short, I started screaming into a microphone. Apparently people felt as if there was some market demand for that. And sure enough, now I've been on Part of the Problem with Dave Smith and Timcast IRL and a bunch of other shows. And I'm very grateful that apparently there is an appetite for my sort of radical libertarianism. I would classify myself more as an anarchist. I don't think that the system is reformable. And I think after the past 2 years, I'm very confident it's not reformable. I'm just most interested in infusing my belief system into the general public in a way that I can hopefully actually build back better when the empire falls, which I think is imminent.
Yeah, it's like you said, last couple of years have been such a weird time with everything going on, and there's a couple positive things that maybe come out of this whole COVID tyranny thing. One, the seemingly the speed up of the collapse of any kind of trust or belief in the mainstream media or anything they have to say, and also the kind of the self segregation that's going on with people flowing out of California and New York and going, to Texas and Florida and places like that.
I'm one of them. Went from California to Miami right now. So
Absolutely. I'm staying where I am. I'm stuck where I am, really. But Northern Kentucky's not a bad place to be
no,
as far as as
you
far as
got
other.
the best. You got the best politicians in the country. I mean, you don't have a great governor, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I live in Thomas Massey's district, so I've been able to.
Oh,
What voting I have done, I've voted for him a few times.
I am so jealous. That is Thomas Massey is my guy.
Yeah, so it's not bad, but like I said, the kind of the self segregation that's going on seems to be where we're headed, and to me, a good thing. What are your thoughts on like the whole national divorce thing and all that? Do you think we're headed to that or some different path?
I actually do think that's where we're headed, and I think it's almost an inevitability at this point. It just boils down to whether or not it's going to be peaceful or violent. My preference is obviously peace. I'm a libertarian. Like my instinct, my first, uh, every what I want always is to avoid hot war,
I mean,
and especially when it comes to a civil war, which would be the worst thing imaginable. So, uh, yeah, I think it's coming though. I mean, it's unfortunate. Not civil war. I think that the secessionary movements are coming,
yeah,
simply because the federal government in particular, but also some of the state governors have essentially declared that like you're not allowed to exist in their purview unless you completely comply with a lot of really egregious oversteps of power, including forced inoculation, and that's something I never thought I'd see in this country. I mean, I just never thought it, and especially on a global basis. It's now kind of been the push for the past 2 years. Got really aggressive over the past 6 months, and I'm grateful to see that a few countries have pulled back, but apparently we, even though all of the science demonstrates that this is ultimately not going anywhere, COVID, I mean,
yeah,
it's it doesn't matter. Like this is I get real tinfoil hatty on this stuff because it just seems to me as if it's not. I don't think it really has anything to do with COVID. That's my personal assessment. I think that this is all about control, compliance, and as someone who is, I've been an entrepreneur. I'm not even married. I very much don't like to be tied down, and this government is just refusing to accept people like me. So I'm going to seek out either a community that allows me to be free, if that's an individual city within a state that's tyrannical, or it's the Free State Project in New Hampshire, or it's DeSantis defending me from the feds in Florida. There's options out there, and I think the divide is only going to grow.
yeah, absolutely. It's scary that how quickly that the word conspiracy theory gets thrown around a lot, or conspiracy theorist, but the speed at which things that were called conspiracy theories are just accepted as normal now. I remember
Right.
like 11 years ago, I remember listening to Alex Jones. And back then he was going on and on about how, they're reading all our emails and they're spying on us and all this other stuff. And everybody said he was crazy. They're not doing all that. And then, of course, they obviously are. And now it's just a common thing, hi, NSA, you read my emails, you're watching, you're keeping tabs on me. How's it going? All that shit. And it's a joke. But
Yep.
it's like the speed with which people can just turn their brain from that's crazy to absolutely that's the way it is and that's the way it should be
Right.
is a little scary.
It's unbelievable. I mean, if you had asked, I think if you had polled Americans in 2019 if forced inoculation was an acceptable thing, I think it would have been 90% against. I mean, it would have been a pretty unanimous, like, fuck you, you don't do that to us.
Yeah.
That's not, we have free will, we have power to decide for ourselves and bodily autonomy, all these other things. And that was a pretty bipartisan perspective. Now you have about half this country that thinks it's completely acceptable. And they don't even remember having the thought 2 years ago that it was an atrocity. So you're right. I mean, this is what I talk about with the ratchet effect. They have been ratcheting us for my entire life, but it really started, in my opinion, after 9/11. The
Yeah.
Patriot Act, TSA, NSA, all that stuff, they really threw the gauntlet down, and under the pretense of terrorism, the war on terror, they implemented most of their most egregious plans, and this, the war on COVID, is the next level of it. I mean, and because we allowed for the war on terror. Now it's coming home. They're persecuting Trump supporters in really egregious ways. They're also persecuting leftist political dissidents, and it's just, if you're awake to it, if you can break from the tribal mold and just identify what's actually transpiring, everyone should be concerned. I mean, everyone should be very concerned and active in fighting back against this, because it's not going to get any easier.
Yeah, 9/11. It's interesting you mentioned that because it really was a starting point for a lot of stuff. It was my 22nd birthday, so I remember, I would say as everybody does vividly. But I was one of those people. I was a hardcore Republican. I was a Rush Limbaugh listener. I voted for W. They attacked us on 9/11. We need to kick their ass. All that stuff. It was to the point where when we started the war in Iraq, I was like VHS taping the war in Iraq because it's like this is going to be our triumphant time. We bring democracy to these backwards people and so on and so forth. Luckily, over the years in '06, I found Ron Paul through MySpace, and
Love it.
by then I could see, what was going on in Iraq wasn't exactly what we were sold in the beginning. My
Right.
disillusionment began to accelerate, but yeah, it's been a long process, and then they were able to just when COVID came along, they just grabbed onto it and are just milking it for all it's worth, and it's a scary time. I mean, it's hard to be optimistic, but you really have no choice, in the face of
Well,
everything that's going on.
let me try and spin this into a white pill for you. I think that things were very bad prior to lockdowns and COVID.
Mm,
So we were all being spied on. We had infinite, eternal wars that were going on. We don't even declare war anymore. Congress doesn't vote on it. It just basically all of our constitutional rights and powers and everything have just been completely ignored. So I think if you want to be optimistic, if you want to take the good from the bad, and don't get me wrong, the past 2 years have been very bad. A lot of people have woken up. I mean, a lot, millions and millions of people, particularly on the conservative side over the past 2 years. But I think a lot of leftists that still believe in bodily autonomy also understand this is a huge problem. I mean, you cannot have a fucking government that tells you what you must put in your body. It's egregious enough that they tell us what we can't put in our body. Telling
yeah,
us what we must? I mean, that is a bridge too far. It's a bridge too far, and that bridge is burned. I mean, it is awful. It's a declaration of war on freedom-loving people, as far as I'm concerned. And I've been fighting against the war on drugs basically my entire life.
mm,
But this is the war on forced drugs. So
yeah,
I don't think, again, I don't think that you get to this point without allowing the precedent of permitting the government to imprison you if you put a substance in your body that they disapprove of. And because we allowed for that, now it's not that big of a logical leap to say now we can imprison you if you don't put this in your body.
yeah,
And I think that's where we're headed. If there's not enough populist uprising, popular will against the forced inoculation, I think that's where they'll go. At this point, I'm very optimistic, though, because I think that they have identified there is a huge swath of this country that flat out won't accept it, never will, and I don't think that they want hot conflict. So I'm hoping that that buys us some time, and the fact that so many people are now identifying how full of shit corporate media is, and news in
yeah,
particular. Um, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful, but it's going to be hard.
yeah, absolutely. It's interesting with a lot of my audience being cannabis users, and they've they will rail against the government about, they say, you should have no say over what I put in my body. If I want to smoke a joint, I can smoke a joint. I'm not hurting anybody.
Right?
So many of those same people will look at you with a straight face and say, yes, the government should be able to force you to be injected with something. And the disconnect just doesn't occur to them at all.
No, it's bizarre to me. There's just a ton of cognitive dissonance that's going on, and
Yeah.
I don't understand it. I don't know. I really, I mean, I guess I do understand it. It's just human fear. People respond to fear in different ways, and a lot of people have completely given up on their principles, which I thought were sincerely held, because they're afraid. And I don't understand why you're afraid. I mean, if you're young and healthy, you really have nothing to be afraid of. But here we are. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that would absolutely gleefully hold me down and inject something in my body if it made them feel 1% safer. It's just incredible.
Absolutely. getting back to the podcast, Liberty Lockdown podcast. Obviously, you love all your guests, and you think they've all been, wonderful, wonderful people. But you have to have some favorites. Do you have any like the really favorite guests of the podcast?
Sure. I mean, Dave is obviously he's my guy. So Dave Smith is amazing. Every time I get to have him on, we've become really good friends over the past year, and that's weird because I was such a huge fan of his. I've been listening to him for 6 years, and first discovered him on Joe Rogan, and
Mm,
so that's all living the dream type stuff. I really think that the best episode I've ever done was with James Lindsay and Josie, formerly the redheaded libertarian on Twitter.
mm,
Uh, that was an amazing episode. James Lindsay is an absolute encyclopedia of critical race theory, and having him on with her so that we could go back and forth about what the Great Reset is, where it's headed. That guy he's an encyclopedia. I mean, he's just amazing. He'll be on Joe Rogan tomorrow, so he's the real deal, and I really would recommend anybody check him out. Particularly check out that episode. I think it was called "How to Stop the Great Reset" or something like that.
mm. Awesome. So, for people who aren't familiar, which may be a lot of people in my audience, how tell us about Tower Gang and what goes on there.
Yeah, Tower Gang. If anyone is familiar with Dave Smith, he has this other program called Legion of Skanks, and
Mm,
it's dubbed as the most offensive podcast in the universe.
yes.
And we're basically just cloning that. I mean, we're just talking shit. It's a bunch of guys that became good friends through the internet, through group chats that just would say the most fucked up things to try and get each other to laugh. And we found each other through that venue. So when we got together and we did a show, we discovered, hey, our chemistry still works on this level where we're just constantly, you know, up in the next guy and trying to make it even more insane. And the way we got our name was when people would, particularly when like corporate news outlets or politicians would say something truly egregious, and we wanted to say something in response, but we knew we would get banned. So what we started to do was called towering, and basically all it is you reply one letter at a time. So you get to say whatever you want as long as it's one letter at a time and it spells out, uh, you know, fuck you or something. So that's how the Tower Gang came to be. It used to be like 50 people that were doing it. It's, as with all dissident political factions, it's fallen apart. It's down to 5 or 6 of us, but we have a lot of fun with it.
Hey, that's all it takes.
Yeah,
Just
we
whoever-
got Bert Kreischer scheduled for this month, so that's
Nice.
crazy. I don't know how that happened.
So obviously, I'm a very this very cannabis themed program is kind of my whole gimmick, as you can see.
Mhm.
Um, Tell me what you can about your life with cannabis, and if you partake, how you got started. There you go. All that stuff.
Yeah, I don't smoke. This is nicotine, but I I smoked when I was younger, a handful of times, 20 times, something like that. And about 50% of the time I had an amazing experience where I was jovial and lighthearted, and everything, food tasted better and the conversations were great and deep and everything was beautiful. And the other half of the time I had a panic attack. So apparently I'm just one of those people that doesn't have the best brain chemistry for it.
Mm,
Or maybe I'm just too much of a pussy to handle it. I don't know. Most stunners just think I'm a sissy and I can't handle the staring into the void of existence. But I tried, I really tried, because I did enjoy those good trips, but the bad ones were like horrific. So I I but yeah, I'm totally pro cannabis. Like, if you want
yeah.
to smoke, please feel free. Like, and certainly anybody that's been in prison for it, as far as I'm concerned, deserves reparations, if it weren't for the fact that I believe that the government and taxes should be abolished, so there'd be nothing to give you. So yeah, it's a huge problem. I mean, it's one of the best medicinal plants that we have, and it's devastating that so many people's lives have been ruined over it. But I go much further than that. I think that any substance you want to put in your body, literally any substance,
Yeah.
should be permitted. And if you are willing to imprison people for going against that, you're you're right up there with slaveholders as far as I'm concerned. Like, you are just pure evil. So
Yeah. Before COVID hit, and I lost a lot of my income from doing freelance writing and cannabis articles and stuff like that. I would get a lot of shit from people for pointing out that the logic behind the legalization of cannabis works for every other substance.
It does.
A lot of people in the cannabis movement are not, they stop at cannabis and that's it. All other stuff's bad. Those are hard drugs. Those are bad people. But what we do is cool. And I never got on board with that. And I would get a lot of shit for, well, among other things, but that particularly pointed out that, it's, if you're going to tell the government that they can't do this, you can't give them leeway in any other area because they'll just take all, they'll take the proverbial mile or whatever.
Yeah, and they have.
Yeah.
So much of a mile that they're now telling you what you must put in your body. I don't understand how these people don't see it. Like, if you're going to say, what is your argument there? Your argument has to be, I own myself, so therefore I get to put in my body what I want, and that includes cannabis. Why would that not apply to Molly or crystal meth or whatever? I mean, the thing is, if you do these substances and then you become a criminal and you hurt others, you go to prison. I mean, everyone still agrees that, like, you can't hurt other people. But if you're just hurting yourself, I mean, I'm also pro assisted suicide, like, or voluntary, suicide if you want to. It's not even that, like, people always try and frame it as if I'm saying that I support these things. Like, I don't support you doing heroin, but you absolutely have a right to, and I support that right fully. It's like, I also don't support people yelling, racial slurs at NAACP conventions. Like, it's a really bad idea, but I support your right to do that because you have free speech. So that's kind of how I view the war on drugs. It's really egregious. And if people that are that have been jeopardized and threatened with imprisonment for their use of a plant for the past, I don't know, 100 years or however long they've been alive, I should say. I don't know how they don't see the logic as it extrapolates to the other substances.
Yeah, it's they get bogged down a lot in the minutia of, well, cannabis is safer because of this, and it does this and it has this kind of value. And once you start getting into those arguments, you're just playing their game.
Exactly.
There's no winning in that.
No, there's not, and it doesn't matter. I mean, that's the thing. Is like, yeah, you can talk about all the good things about it, and you can use that as your justification for claiming it's a medicine and it should be legalized under a medicinal property, but that's missing the mark. I mean, you should be arguing it on principle alone. You own yourself and you have the right, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they think. It doesn't matter if they think it's immoral or unhealthy or anything else. We do a ton of shit that's unhealthy. I'm vaping. That's unhealthy. I drink sometimes. That's unhealthy. I eat a bunch of sugar and fat and all sorts of things. That's unhealthy. Doesn't matter. Government doesn't have the right. And that's why I don't even get into the medicinal properties. I mean, I could make the same argument for MDMA, for PTSD sufferers. It's tremendously beneficial. So who cares?
Absolutely.
I mean, for productivity, crystal meth is pretty great.
Yeah.
Again, who cares?
Yeah. With cannabis use, it's, like I said, there's so much weirdness in the community, and there's so many just opposing angles and viewpoints and things that don't make sense. And I think that's what's hampered the cannabis community for a lot of years. And even in the last 10 or so years of legalization and the things that we have been able to advance, it's been so half-assed and poorly done and compromised and watered down. And in a lot of ways, I've become disillusioned with that aspect of the community too, with just because whatever you accept, whatever we get is going to be better than prohibition. We're all going to accept and say, oh, that's cool. Now I can pay exorbitant taxes for a dispensary that's allowed to be open for 3 hours a day.
Right.
And, yay me. But if we just would have stepped back for a minute and thought more, we should have it all and not just these piss poor compromises where we're counting on the government to legalize something that they deemed 80 years ago that they didn't like and we're going to demonize. And now all of a sudden they're going to be in charge of, here's your weed and we're going to do this great job. And I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, no, it's you gotta argue based off of first principles. If you believe you own yourself, it's really like that's what you have to stand on. And if you stand on that, you don't have to accept these compromises. I mean, it shouldn't be regulated. It should be I'm an anarchist, so I believe that the government should be completely out of regulating business and taxing us and everything else, and we should just have private organizations that deem products safe or not and all that. But if we're going to go down this path, you're basically gonna end up right back in this situation. Because if you ever allow them to tell you what you can put in your body, well, then eventually they're going to criminalize things that you like. It's going to happen eventually. And this is what happened with a lot of cannabis users, is like they realized, oh, I've been lied to. This isn't actually that dangerous. It's actually really beneficial. And then it's too late. It's too
Yeah.
late because you already allowed for prohibition to take hold. But you're totally right too about, because I mean, if you want real hard evidence about who is corrupt in this country, if you want to talk about business versus the government, just look at what happened with the cannabis market post legalization. Prices have gone up. In
Yeah.
what other market do you have a black market item that when it becomes legalized, the price drops? I mean, that's or goes up rather.
Yeah.
It should have plummeted, because you should have all of these people entering the field to compete with one another, and you should have immense amounts of supply, and you do. But because of the taxation, they've actually made it so that it's, in most states, in my experience, it's now more expensive to buy pot than it was, when it was severely criminalized. So,
Absolutely.
and the government.
I will say this about cannabis use, getting back to the actual use, is definitely not for everybody. I've said that for as long as I've been doing shows like this, which is now 16 years. And even before that, when I started smoking, it's I've seen so many different reactions to it from different people. And some people just, they don't function well on it. They don't like it. It doesn't agree with them, whatever it is. And it gets back to just the simple freedom of choice, which so many people just, they don't believe in, they piss away, they won't fight for, whatever it is. But it's such a simple concept that you choose what you do and don't do as long as you're not hurting anyone else. And how so many people have lost it. Honestly, I don't know how it's happened, but obviously public education and
Yeah.
things like that have eroded critical thinking skills, or whatever it takes to get to just that simple concept. And again, that's why I love having people like you on the show, and to, especially to my audience, who I feel like a lot of them are, they can see what happened with cannabis, as I said, so they're there. If they
Right.
can just shift that window to other things, a lot of them may be, further down the road of being awake, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and to those that are listening that are, pro vaccine, just to clarify, I'm not really against vaccination. I am against forced vaccination. If you want to do it, go ahead. Same thing with all drugs. If you want to do it, go ahead. But you can't mandate that I do it. It'd be like mandating everyone smoke pot. Maybe the world would be a better place. I don't know, but I'm still not okay with you forcing me to do something against my will. I own myself. You can't do it. Fuck you. That's my response every time someone tries to do anything against my will. And especially when it comes to putting something in my body. I mean, that's rape. You are advocating for rape based off of your fear. That's crazy. That's a crazy thing to do. It's a crazy way to think, especially if you're the type of person who has been jeopardized and endangered by the state telling you what you can't put in your body. If you can't extrapolate from there, I don't know what you're looking at. Like, just
Yeah,
take the logical leap. It's right there for you. Please, I'm begging you.
absolutely. So, what do you got coming up, Clint? What kind of guests you got coming up on the show? What's the future look like for Liberty Lockdown, and what you got going on?
I've got Dave Smith coming back on sometime in the next month. And other than that, I've been actually focusing more on solo shows lately. I did a deep dive called Fauci is Finished last week, which is probably the most downloaded episode I've ever done. It's going viral in some communities. I don't know. I don't know how that happens, but people seem to really love it. I do this deep dive where I put together, 10 or 12 articles, and I kind of paint this picture as I kind of run down these articles, and I extrapolate out and say, like, how likely is it that this guy is actually, guilty of crimes? And by the end of it, you come away pretty convinced that he's not long for this earth, at least in criminal terms. So I don't know. It's a crazy time, but that's what I'm doing more of lately is solo shows. People seem to really enjoy it because I talk a lot more on them. But I still have a lot of great guests on all the time, and I don't even know all the people that I have queued up. Bunch of YouTube personalities that most people probably haven't heard of, but are big in their own little niche market. So it's going to be fun.
Cool. So, where can people find you online besides, libertylockdownpodcast.com, and of course on Twitter at Liberty Lock Pod? Where else can people find you?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I have other social media handles over on Minds and other stuff, but I just get my stuff mirrored over there. I don't really use it too much. So
Yeah.
as of now, I am still under the Leviathan. I'm still using Twitter. That's my primary outlet. I'm about to break 30,000 followers, so I'm gonna catch Stoner Jesus one of these days. So
Well,
yeah,
they're dwindling mine away, so you probably will sooner or later. I was at 150,000 at one point, and then there was
you're
like
at how much?
150,000.
Wow.
Yeah. Then there was like a purge that sent me to 142, and it's just been getting whittled away. And
Yep.
the algorithm is just
It's
pounding me.
brutal. Yeah,
It's
no, it's brutal. I've lost thousands of followers through those purges too, so I don't, I know the pain. But yeah, it's still, as far as I'm concerned, the best in terms of community, especially for libertarians. It's really solid still. For conservatives, I think that most of them, or many of them, have migrated to Gab and other places. But
yeah,
for now, I'm hanging on. They'll nuke me eventually. But yeah, Liberty Lockdown. You can search me pretty much anywhere, and I really appreciate you having me on.
no problem, man. No, thanks for having being on, and you got more stuff to talk about, more stuff to promote. Anything in the future, let us know, man. We'll have you back on.
I appreciate it. Yeah, if anyone wants to support my show, you can go to libertylockdown.locals.com, become a supporting member of the show. I'm retired, so all of the funds actually just go towards growing the show. I just don't want to come out of pocket to
Yeah,
try and market the show, because I'm not making any money from it for the most part. So if anyone wants to support my messaging and allow me to create a bigger platform to reach more people, that's all I'm working on. I'm trying to save the world here, as delusional as that sounds.
hey, same here. We're all doing our part. We'll see.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks, Clint.
Appreciate you, man.
All right, man. Have a good night.